Hello, everyone. Welcome to A2B Podcasts. We here talk about gaming perspectives. I am here with Amdrag from the channel Amdrag. Hello.
Hello.
And I'm here with Damien from the channel Beyond Brainwaves.
Hi.
Today, we're going to be talking about the pricing situation with video games, not just in the United States, but all over the world. But with that said, let's roll the intro. Hello again, everyone. We're going to get started, and today we're talking about pricing and video games. We're going to focus this conversation starting with Nintendo, but we're going to talk about other pieces of the industry as well. As I'm sure all of us have experienced, pricing in the industry is starting to get more expensive due to a bunch of different factors, whether you're in the United States or not. It kind of affects all of us. I actually want to start with Damien because we're going to talk a lot about the U.S., obviously, but Damien has this perspective of pricing in Europe. So, Damien, what have you experienced with pricing and video games and video game consoles over there in Europe?
Okay. Yeah, so honestly, when it comes to buying new things, in the video game market, I haven't been that up to date in Europe. From what I know, with the Switch 2 and all of that, it seems as if the price seems to be like, I don't know how much did the Nintendo Switch 2 cost?
It cost, I think it was
500?
was it? No, I think it was $449 in the United States. It was $449 if you bought it without Mario Kart World, and $500 if you bought it with Mario Kart World.
Okay.
Was it?
So
No, it was. Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's
I
what
thought
it
it was
was.
400 and 450.
It was 400 and 450?
I think so. But
Let
maybe I'm wrong.
me check on that.
Okay.
You guys keep talking.
Yeah,
I'm gonna
sorry.
check.
I'm recording
let's
on
say
my
for the
phone, so I
sake
can't
of
look
the
it up.
argument, let's say for the sake of the argument that it's 450. So that if it's 450, that would be like maybe even 400 euros. But as far as I know, in Europe, it's being sold for the exact same price, but in euros. So if it's $450, it's 450 euros, which makes it even more expensive because of how the dollar to the euro currency kind of thing is evolving. From what I know, the euro has stayed a bit more stable and the dollar has lost value in the last couple of months and weeks. So I think everything that we're going to talk about, the US market in general, I think it affects, at least when it comes to Nintendo, the European market in an even worse way because the currency exchange isn't very just, I would say.
It was 400. It was 450 and 500.
That's it.
And yeah, I have. I'm aware that conversions kind of are always on the negative for people outside of the U.S. But so I'm not surprised that it's considered more expensive in Europe. And of course, it doesn't help that we've got certain aspects of the government kind of messing with that, and then you'd think it would only impact the U.S., but no, it kind of impacts everywhere else even more, just because of how the companies have decided to handle the tariffs, right? So if you're not informed, a lot of countries around the world they saw increased prices with a bunch of stuff because the U.S. is such a huge market for video games. We are just talking about video games. We're not gonna try to talk about anything else in that regard.
Yeah.
They
This is
didn't
not a
want
political part.
right. The companies didn't want to increase the price in the U.S. too much because if they did, it would hurt that market. So instead, they increased the price everywhere else by a smaller degree, but still notably. I think Canada was another country that kind of got hit by that. Their hardware prices have gone up a little bit, and same thing in the rest of the world. The hardware prices go up just a little bit to compensate for the fact that the companies aren't going to make as much profit here in the U.S. So that's how that works. I do actually happen to know kind of a lot about that. So
to address also the elephant in the room, the big topic is video game prices, right? And the Switch 2 came out a while ago, almost. Not that long ago, but a few months ago. And I'm the only one out of this very Nintendo-focused podcast who hasn't bought the Nintendo Switch 2.
That's true.
And I'm not planning on buying one.
So
I might have addressed
here's
in
my
a different
question
iteration.
then. What would make you decide, not that we're going to push you to buy one, because why would we do that?
Yeah, of course.
What would make you decide, okay, now I'm going to buy a Switch 2? Or will you, period? I'm curious.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think the biggest point behind all of this is there's so many factors to talk about. But I think the main factor is that I have lost trust and faith in Nintendo. I actually don't like them as a company, and I don't want to support them. Except if the benefits for me outweigh the negatives, which for me would be supporting Nintendo, being part of their ecosystem, then sure, if I really wanted to play Donkey Kong Bonanza, for example, which I actually do, then maybe, I might have to give in. But so far it hasn't gotten to this point. And so I think the biggest factor is that I don't feel that I really, really need it right now. I have still lots of Switch games that I plan on playing through, and lots of other retro games also. So I don't feel the need that I need to really play the newest game. I'm always kind of more, I don't know if any of you know about tech and stuff like that, but I'm more of a stable than rolling release kind of guy, more Debian than Arch, if you know any Linux or stuff like that. Maybe I'm too autistic for this podcast, if I'm speaking in Linux terms now. But basically it means that I don't care that much about being up to date with everything. If something works, why not stick with it? Because very often, when something is new, there's also problems that come with it. So in my teens, in my mid-teens, I was a fan. I bought the Wii U when it came out, and I regretted it. I should have waited. I don't regret owning a Wii U, but it wasn't worth it to buy it at launch. And I also bought the Switch at launch, actually. And it was fine because it came with Breath of the Wild and whatever. But very often, there's countless of stories with lots of games, especially from Western developers like Cyberpunk, that come out. They're basically broken. And yeah, I like to wait and give everything some time to see until the hype dies down if something is really worth it. And I just prefer, focusing on older games, not necessarily only retro games, but also PS4 games that came out a few years ago that I can buy really cheap, for example. So I think this is.
I think it's fair.
I can respect that. That makes a lot of sense. The idea. So for you, there's an element of consumer activism. And that's something that we see a lot. I think in America, it sure is pretty common, where there's a lot of you vote with your dollar and who do you want to support and why. And I think it's interesting to hear that, because when I was making more money, I was buying pretty much every new game as it came out, because I had that feeling where I wanted to be on top of everything that was happening, and I really wanted to be in the conversation and know about every new game and really be involved with it. But there's only so much time in the day,
right?
Right. And so where I sit now is I don't buy literally everything. There are things that I'm pretty comfortable waiting to go on sale, or kind of keeping an ear out instead of pre-ordering it off the bat like I used to. But there's this element with Nintendo that I think is really interesting, because Nintendo, they will shut down fan ROMs, ROM hacks. They'll shut down Melee tournaments. They will, they're very adversarial to creators. There's lots of problems on YouTube with using your Nintendo stuff, and they have the Nintendo Creators Program, and it's they are so problematic in so many ways. and I get why you would not want to engage with that, and you wouldn't want to be part of that like economic ecosystem. But for me, I really, really wanted to play Donkey Kong Bonanza, you know, and there is like the line is just it's way closer to me. You know, it's like, no, I really do. You know, there's something about that induces so much nostalgia and joy and like childlike wonder for me. And especially playing that particular game and feeling like, yeah, nobody else could have made this. Nobody else could have done it. There's no other team in the world that could have produced a video game that like is this quality, in my opinion, and this creative in these ways. So I don't know, like I respect your position for sure. And I don't think that you're wrong. And I don't think you should, you know, really get on scooping up a Switch 2 right away. But I do think it's interesting because there is a moral conversation to be had there. And just engaging with capitalism, period, is always going to, you know, test and stress one's morality and what and who they support.
So real quick,
For sure.
Damien, can I ask, what is it about Nintendo that has you like lost faith in them? Just out of curiosity.
Okay. So spoiler, I'm gonna loot drop something about that, which I think 2 videos maybe that do a much better job at explaining it. But I feel like that Nintendo has become like the Disney of video games, that they milk your nostalgia, your attachment, your psychological needs to think back to a simpler time by, you know, kind of having that bait, you know, that Nintendo nostalgia, the Nintendo seal of quality. And it seems to me that they've been abusing it more and more lately. I feel like they've become less pro-consumer. I think it's more like, hey, we're Nintendo. We found out that we can get away with a lot of stuff. And so we're gonna do whatever we get away with. And to bring it back to, you know, the prices, that, you know, simply saying, hey, supply and demand. We think that the game will sell for so much. It's not anymore, hey, we could sell it for the same price, like all these games for the same price as all the games before, even before that, right? With the Tears of the Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
But no, we're Nintendo. We can ask more. No other company came up with the idea to hike the prices so much, but we can do it because we're Nintendo.
So
And
I
get this kind of arrogant feeling from them, from a lot of their actions, as you said, also like the whole affair with Pal World that happened. For those that don't know, there's a game, it's called Pal World, and it's very similar to Pokemon games. And then after it came out, Nintendo copyrighted being able to have a mount or capturing
they've
animals
shifted
and
their
spherical
legal
things.
They keep shifting their legal strategy to try to restrict Pal World. Yes, they do.
Yeah, and they're copywriting, or I don't know what the other word is for that, but basically patenting like very basic things, like capturing monsters with a spherical object or riding on monsters. And I think that's very scary. Again, it reminds me of Disney, who actually profited off a lot of public domain things like Snow White and all of these stories, and then they do everything so nothing from them gets into the public domain. Like it took like over 100 years for just Steamboat Willie to get into the public domain. Just that. Anything else Mickey Mouse related is still owned by Disney and all of that. And so I think obviously there's been before Nintendo like a lot of instances for things that they are trying to patent and copyright. And yeah, to me it feels quite scummy. What do you guys
I think
think?
video game patents in general feel kind of scummy mechanically. I think that that's a really hard thing because, I mean, it'd be like patenting like a musical sound or something like that. You know, I always have a hard time when there are legal battles over like melodies or things. And, you know, in most cases, it's kind of like, you know, no, this is bound to happen. I really think that art should always iterate on art that came before it. But I think where I would like kind of make an argument, and this wouldn't necessarily be in favor of Nintendo, but I really do think that the problem lies in like the way that patenting and copywriting systems work.
So
because if
that's
Nintendo didn't go and copyright, catching a thing with the ball, it's like somebody else would, and that doesn't justify it.
Right.
It's wrong, but it is.
The thing is,
the
thing is, no one did it before. Like, they came up with the idea after Pal World. Almost as if trying
it's because
to really go after it.
So the reason, there's the whole Pal World situation. There's a lot of like stuff going on behind scenes that we definitely are not privy to, right?
Right.
And I've talked about him before. Moon Channel has done a video on the Pal World thing that I found really, really interesting. And anyone should watch that because you will much better understand what is actually going on at Nintendo. If you do, but it is way less to do with like Nintendo, and people are gonna be like, well, what do you mean Nintendo? It's the Pokemon company. It's Nintendo. Nintendo it's not so much that they're going after Pal World, it's that they are protecting their copyright because of how copyright and patent law is written. It's all because the laws are out of date, and they're super, super out of date. I mean, I don't know. I'd have to look it up, but I don't think copyright or patent law has been updated since like the 1950s. I don't know. It's been a long time because most countries around the world base their copyright and patent law off of the United States. Japan is unique in that they have even stricter copyright and patent law than we do. And it's super out of date. So there's more there. I'm not saying what Nintendo is doing is okay because it's not, especially with the Pal World thing. Although again, there's more going on there than you might think. I'm saying that the reason they're doing it is not because they're like, oh, Pal World is making a Pokemon clone, which it's not a Pokemon clone. If you've ever played it, you know it's not a Pokemon clone. It uses elements of Pokemon, but it's not a Pokemon clone. But
as the Dark Prince of this podcast, again, my counter argument would be that, well, the timing is very suspicious. How come they didn't come up with this idea before Pal World?
I don't think it's suspicious at all. I think it's just being put up for conversation right now.
Pal World blew up like crazy.
Yeah, and so before then, it's like I bet you could probably find other monster tamers where there's a ball involved or whatever, But this is like a backed, really popular, blowing up, Chinese video game that's coming out that is, using mechanics that they relate. And again, not defense, but Pal World, it pulls a lot from like Pokemon designs. There's a lot of suggestions that they maybe used AI, which probably sourced Pokemon designs when they were designing its creatures. There's lots of like looking at their models and seeing that it's like the same model as like a Luxray or something like that, but with a different skin over it. It's like, again, there is more. And also I think Pal World sucks. Like, I mean, I don't, like not to get personal about it, but Pal World is just a very generic survival RPG.
Yeah, so that's the other thing. Like, it's not a Pokemon clone; it's a survival game. It's a survival game with Pokemon elements, right? Although I do find it very funny that you can catch the humans in the Pal balls or whatever they're called. I agree. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
But it's not a Pokemon game. It's way closer to something like Ark than it is, or even Minecraft.
Yes.
It's way closer to something like that than it is Pokemon. It's just, it uses Pokemon elements, right? But I said, it's
but
going.
I think the whole copyright thing is just bad.
Yeah, it's outdated.
The whole thing just doesn't work very well, and
I think to get to another point of contention with Nintendo to answer your questions, because kind of complex. As I talked about with the pricing, I don't know what you guys think about that. I think, Lucas, you might want to talk more about, the specifics of pricing and stuff like that. But I feel that, for example, this Nintendo Switch 2 guide that you have to pay $10 for or whatever.
I mean, that's dumb.
I think, again, it's a scummy move.
Yeah.
I think in the past, Nintendo would have, given this out for free. And the fact that they don't, it just shows we don't value the consumers. We just know we can get away with it. We're not going to be nice, you know?
So a little bit of history
And-
here. A little bit of history here on that. You might be surprised because Reggie Fils-Aimé, who used to be the president of Nintendo of America, he was kind of the big driver of free products being included in a console purchase, or
Again,
like a
Wii
game.
the
Sports.
back-end game.
Wii Sports.
Wii Sports,
Yep.
so important.
Wii
to video
Sports,
game.
Breath of the Wild. I'm sure. I think there was something that came with the GameCube. I'm not sure, but that was
Breath of the
actually.
Wild wasn't a pack-in.
It wasn't.
No.
No, I don't.
And the GameCube, I don't think had a pack-in either. I think there were
so maybe
pack-in
it was
bundles.
maybe it's just there were bundles.
I bet you maybe got Breath of the Wild with
I
yours
probably
or whatever.
did.
But
I
like,
probably did.
I think of Wii Sports. I think in Nintendo Land for the
Yeah,
Wii U,
yeah,
that
yeah,
one
yeah.
was one that everybody got.
Yeah,
Things
that-
like that.
so
And then
that-
the 3DS family had really good pack-ins as
They
well.
did. So that was almost all either Reggie Fils-Aimé himself or just Nintendo of America kind of pushing that, because Nintendo of Japan, they do not think they should be including anything. And they think that everything should be priced, and they have. And actually, it's Miyamoto. It's Shigeru Miyamoto who has a quote out there somewhere. I'd have to find it. That says, like, the reason for that is because we work really, really hard on the things that we make, and we should be compensated. And
Yeah.
I get it. Like, that's
But
kind
they
of
worked so hard.
I
They worked
kinda
so
think-
hard on this Nintendo Switch 2 guide, which has like the quiz. Like,
And I'm not gonna
I don't know.
argue- I'm not gonna argue
it was,
with that. I don't-
Extremely brain dead.
The Nintendo
like,
Switch
I
2
think there was some question like, how do you turn on your Switch, or what does this button do, or does your Nintendo Switch have a kickstand? They quiz you about like
Yeah.
some of the dumbest stuff.
it's a Switch 2
and they
tour.
charge for it.
Right. It's a Switch 2 tour, and should it have been included in the Switch 2? Yeah, it should have. I mean, it's
So
stupid.
there's the question: was the development of that game considered in the development cost of the console?
I mean, who
Because
knows?
video game consoles are typically sold at a significant loss, right? And the
Although-
expectation is always to make back your money on software.
Nintendo's, I don't think are. I think Nintendo.
Yeah.
The development is different than the actual manufacturing. Nintendo profits off of the Switch 2. When they sell a Switch 2, they make more money than they use to actually make that individual unit. That has always been the case. It's not the case for Sony. Sony sold PS5 and I think PS4 as well at a loss, and I think Xbox too. But honestly, Xbox is kind of irrelevant at this point. But they do profit off of all of their individual sales. But Nintendo, I want you to think about something for a second, Damien. And Daisy, I wonder, I'm sure you've maybe realized this. I want you to think about. Now let's do Breath of the Wild, okay? Let's do Breath of the Wild. I want you to think about Breath of the Wild. It's a single player game. It came out. It was $60 at release, right? It got a DLC a couple years in. I think the DLC was like $15-ish, something like that. And other than that, is there anything else that you can pay for regarding that game?
When it came out, no.
Once you buy
There was
Breath of the
DLC
Wild,
that-
yeah, once you buy Breath of the Wild and the DLC, if you want to include that, is there anything else that you can possibly spend money on for that game?
The amiibo figures.
I mean, the amiibo, right? And what did the amiibo do in
Right.
Breath of the Wild?
It dropped a treasure chest from the sky
Yep.
that would maybe have a cool piece of equipment in it.
Right. Minor things, right? And
Yeah.
and it's an amiibo, so amiibos I've always found kind of different because it's a figure. You get a little figure, and then the figures can
Yeah.
interact with the game.
I agree,
Right.
but if I don't say it, someone in the comments will. So.
Right, for sure. Let's think about then. I think I'll give you a hint. It's going to be the same answer for pretty much every Nintendo game. I'm not talking about the mobile games. There are mobile games that kind of betray that a little bit, but every Nintendo game from Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, which has the DLC characters and nothing else, Super Mario Odyssey, which literally has nothing else. Super Mario Odyssey it didn't even receive paid DLC. Luigi's Mansion 3. We're thinking about Switch games here. Fire Emblem Engage had DLC, and that's it. That game was interesting. Three Houses, which I've never played. I don't even know if Three Houses had DLC. But even
Three Houses does have DLC.
It has DLC.
It's very good DLC. Yeah.
Even the partners, right? If we're thinking about Xenoblade Chronicles has DLC. There's Xenoblade Chronicles 2 literally has a gacha game inside the game, and there is no microtransactions. Zero. Mm-hmm. Xenoblade Chronicles 3, same thing. I don't know if Xenoblade Chronicles 3 has a gacha game, right? Mario Kart 8 has an enormous amount of DLC that you can buy for pretty inexpensive in compared to what you would normally. I mean, like all of the Mario Kart 8 DLC is like 3 Mario Kart games, right? So my point is, Nintendo, yeah, they have been raising prices. They Tears of the Kingdom the first $70 game? I think it was. I think Tears of the Kingdom was the first $70 game. Mario Kart World was the first $80 game. Bonanza is $70, which if either that's interesting to me because Bonanza is so much better of a game than Mario Kart World. Yeah. It seems to me like those got switched. But they don't do microtransactions. But you go to Sony, you go to Xbox, you go to random games on Steam, right? And obviously mobile is just a mess, right? You would be hard pressed to find games that don't have microtransactions. Monster Hunter Wilds, which came out this year, that game launched with tons of microtransactions, and that game was broken when it came out. I loved it, I really did, but that game, performance was awful on basically all platforms. It was, content-wise, it's arguably less than when World came out, and it launched with a ton of microtransactions, just a ton.
Yeah, I think in general
how it is with a lot of games.
Yeah, I think the video game market has become like very anti-consumer. That in the 80s or in the 90s, they would do their best to bring out a masterpiece, and there were really shitty games that were being sold at the same price as some masterpieces that still stand the test of time that you can't even put a price on. And
yeah, but you did, and they were expensive.
Yeah,
and I think that it would be dishonest to not remember that Donkey Kong Country was $150. The year that it came out, and maybe that's an exaggeration because again, I record on my phone, I can't Google stuff, but it was expensive. It was, and for inflation, Donkey Kong Country 1 would be $200 or something. There was video games were not standardized in their pricing at that time. And so you say some trash games would come out for crazy prices and some really good games would come out for really cheap. And there wasn't really a standard bringing it together.
Donkey Kong Country 2, that's just the one that popped up. Donkey Kong Country 2, the Diddy Kong's Quest, that was $80 when it came out. That was $80 in 1995, which is very expensive. And also the SNES itself, the SNES, how much was that? Hold on. I'll look it up.
$250, I think.
The
that
SNES
used to be their standard.
In 1991, the SNES was $200, which is $460 now, with inflation. That's really expensive.
It's hard because, what this conversation will inevitably have to boil down to, right? We were talking about copyright stuff and we're saying that this isn't fair the way that they do that. And you're right, but it's a systemic issue, right? And then when we look at prices, we have lived through $50 video games, $60 video games, and now apparently the bygone age of $70 video games, which went in the blink of an eye. And there is this moment where it's okay, why are things getting more expensive? Why is it getting harder to buy stuff? Why is it getting harder to entertain myself? Why is it? And again, the issue is just going to come down to capitalism. It's going to come down to the fact that this is encouraged, is that inflation only ever goes in one direction. It's that things only get more expensive. It will only ever get harder. Things will only get worse. I go to Taco Bell and I spend like $30.
Right.
It's like, it's really, it's a huge systemic issue, but it doesn't make it cool. I'm not happy about it, because the indie market does exist. And the indie market is kicking ass on a totally different pricing scale, and that can't be ignored.
Hollow Knight came out at $15. That game has like a regular playthrough of that game is like 60 hours, 60 quality hours, and that game came out at $15. So that is true.
I mean, Deltarune and Undertale, they could just say they could charge so much more the game right now.
They could.
You're absolutely right. But if you look at the industry... 30, 40, 50,
it would be still... I don't think a lot of people would have any problems with that. Like, and that's the thing. Like, it just opens a can of worms when they're like... When, you're saying that it used to be like that in the 90s. I got Donkey Kong Country on the SNES as a gift from someone who, was older in the 90s. I was born in 98. So I didn't live through that, but in the console generations that I was conscious of, things like these, what you're talking about with DKC2, I'm not really aware of a lot of games like that were really extremely expensive.
That's because of Sony. So this is super interesting. I love this kind of history. It's because of the PlayStation. Because when the PlayStation came out, Sony made the play that all of their games were going to be $50, right? Before that, when video games came out, their prices varied, right? Some were more expensive, some were less expensive. But when Sony came out with the PlayStation, which they sold at a loss, all of the games that came out on PlayStation were $50, including Final Fantasy VII, which had like, how many discs? I don't know. It had 3 discs? 3 or 4 discs?
4.
3 or 4.
Massive, like 60 to 70 hour game, kind of unlike anything the world had ever seen at that point. And all of those games were $50. And so the market had to respond. Nintendo had to respond, and Sega and Sega basically was the only other one. They had to respond at that point, and they had to then start setting their games to $50. Because if they didn't, well, everybody would just go buy a PlayStation and play those games instead. Because at that point, Nintendo hadn't, they certainly had brand awareness. There was Mario, there was Zelda and stuff like that. But it wasn't like, this is Nintendo. This is a video game. And you could go and play a video game on PlayStation as well. And so PlayStation did that, which, okay, fair. Like, that was a strategy, and it catapulted them. They had the PlayStation 2, which is the PlayStation 2 still the single best-selling console of all time? I think it is. I don't think the Switch has beat it yet. So the PlayStation 2, the single best-selling console of all time, had amazing games on the PlayStation 2, right? And all were $50. But now that's changing because development costs for games are getting so bloated. I mean, exactly. How much money do you think? I mean, I don't know. In the 80s and 90s, it probably costs more than we'd be able to calculate now because of inflation. But like comparatively, the amount of work, time, and staff and effort to create Super Mario World is significantly lower than what it takes to create like whatever Nathan Drake game is coming out or what. I don't know. I actually haven't ever played a game like that. Let's use God of War. God of War Ragnarok, right? God of War Ragnarok is way more intensive in needs to create than something like Super Mario World. Even when considering inflation and technology, all of that, it's so much more because these games are just massive. Which is kind of funny because we were potentially talking about HD2D as a topic. And in my brain, I'm kind of like, we need to like go backwards on graphics and all this other stuff because what we're getting is too much. And we've got games like Celeste, which use 16-bit graphics and look unbelievably beautiful, and you have games like, even 8-bit. There's games that are designed in an 8-bit style nowadays that are amazing, right? So, I mean, it is an industry thing. It's a systemic thing, as you were saying, Daisy. But it isn't. It's not just Nintendo, and Nintendo isn't necessarily like the driver of the evil,
But I do think that Nintendo, like now with the Switch 2 launch and everything, and other things that I haven't mentioned yet that I'm gonna get into, I feel like Nintendo says like, we're not the nice guys anymore. Like there's been like videos, I'm gonna link them in the loot drop, that compared the Switch 1 launch to the Switch 2 launch. And there's a lot of details that I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but one of them is that Nintendo can't brick your Switch 1 whenever you're just trying to do something with it. I think this is a really huge thing, like to me personally, because it means that I don't own something I buy. And I think that's really shitty. And something also that I wanted to mention is you very correctly talked about, the prices back then and the inflation, how expensive the SNES or those Donkey Kong Country games would be nowadays. But something that isn't mentioned very often is not only the inflation itself, but also other statistics that are not taken in account of in the overall inflation. For example, real estate, how much the value is even above the inflation. It hasn't risen just by 2%. It's for any Gen Z person, owning a house is, if not impossible, it's just a bad choice. Nowadays.
Yeah. I agree.
There's other things. There's also wages. That wages have not risen as much as they should have been. It's really been stagnating. So comparatively, someone in the 80s, even if you paid, I don't know, let's say 700 in today's US dollars for an SNES, a lot more things in life would be economically, at least from the statistics that I've done my research on. I didn't live in the 80s. But when you account for the wages adjusted for inflation and for, rent and real estate and owning a house and all of that, I think it does feel different, right? That's what I have heard also from, people that are more aware of, the older times of the inflation that you mentioned now.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. But
I think that you're right.
Yeah. Go ahead, Daisy. I gotta think about it.
Dance?
No, I gotta think about it.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think that you're right about that. And at the heart of it, you said, like, I don't know, 40 minutes ago, this isn't a political podcast. And that is a very difficult thing for me.
It's not a political podcast.
The name of the beast.
Yeah.
The name of the beast is capitalism. The name of the beast is an unregulated market. It's like we know what this is. We know what causes this. And so I think that in my heart, I actually kind of get where you're coming from, Damien, because there was, especially when you're young, Nintendo did feel like a friend, right? And with pack-ins and with like maybe things being at a cheaper price point during the Wii U era, being a family-oriented thing, it's like all of that really did give them the appearance and the feeling that this is the good choice for a stable, family to be able to afford and be able to. And the Switch 2 comes out, and the Switch 2's messaging is this is premium. The Switch 2 messaging from the very beginning, Doug Bowser is out there saying, like, they're like, what about people who can't afford a Switch 2? And he goes, well, they can buy a Switch 1, and there will still be Switch 1 games. And there is, like, that shift is real. You have not made that up. But there is kind of, what I think is interesting is a lot of times, especially in the American market, the premium market is very superfluous. You think about like premium products, you think about premium shoes, you think about like things that people show off because they are brand names or whatever. And it's this ridiculous thing that I can hardly get my head around. It's like a store of value, and people get really into sneakers, really into watches or things like that. It's like wealthy people trying to figure out how they can hoard their wealth creatively and turn it into assets and things like that. But now I think there is this moment where we do have a premium market in video games that is emerging. And I think part of that is being ushered in by the ethos of the Switch 2, where it's like owning a Switch 2 at this moment, it's like it's selling really well. And I don't think that the sales are reflecting what I'm about to say, but we're saying like, okay, an $80 video game is a thing and it exists now. And if you don't want that, you don't have to do that. But the fact is, a lot more work went into it. Factors like real estate, like Damien was saying, factors that are invisible go into this. It justifies a higher cost. And I think that that's probably true. I think Donkey Kong Bonanza could have been an $80 video game and probably would have had a fairly fair like market margin on like value and what they could have made off of it. But it's like we weren't thinking that way before, that there should be a premium category, that like some games should just be more expensive. And it comes to that conversation that people float on the internet now is, how much is Grand Theft Auto 6 going to cost?
Yeah.
All these years of development, all of this crunch, all of this whatever. It's like, what can they really charge for it that reflects the value?
Current estimate, by the way, is that it's going to cost $100, which doesn't matter to me because I'm not going to play it. But
you know what? I will play it, but $100, that would suck. And everybody would feel really upset about that. And that would be really disappointing to the customer. But it has more to do with the way that the consumer is being squeezed by other factors.
Yeah.
And so It's like there were people who can pick up the Switch 2 without even thinking about it. And then there were people like me who did it anyway because I really wanted one and because I have a family and because, I pride myself on being able to provide my kids with cool new video game experience. I like that. And so, but it was a concession. It was something I really had to think about. It was something I did have to budget for.
Yeah.
And then there'll be people who, I'm fine with my Switch 1. I don't need a PS5. I have the PS4. I like retro games. There's so much other stuff to play. Pirate stuff. It's ethical, and then you have the whole conversation with indie games, which I think is really where this becomes the most important element of the whole thing, is that the independent game space gets to grow and flourish because there will be people shifting away from what is now being perceived as the premium video game space. And while the indie developers will not have the budget to make Donkey Kong Bonanza, they will have the creativity to make something else that nobody's ever seen before. And we do see that constantly. And so again, this is not great. It's more of a byproduct of a bad thing happening, but it is okay to look at silver linings, I think.
Yeah.
I do like that there's room for that.
Yeah, it's also something I wanted to mention because you mentioned about the whole ecosystem. It's like in the 80s, how many subscriptions were you paying for each month for something?
Yeah, I mean,
right, cable, right,
now,
cable in your bills.
You have one for Netflix, one for Hulu, one for Amazon Prime. You have, I don't know,
my Nintendo Online account, my PlayStation Plus account, Game Pass.
Exactly.
Spotify.
Like there's so many things that it's hidden. Like a lot of companies, they make it especially difficult for you to quit those, even if you want to quit them. There have been lawsuits with huge companies just to make it easier for the consumer to quit a subscription. This was not a thing back then. So I think
predatory and it's facilitated by the laws.
Exactly. I think the whole ecosystem, when it comes, to the market in general, to capitalism in general, again, I don't think it's as simple as just socialism or communism is good and capitalism is bad. I think each economic system, there is no perfect economic system, and all of them are flawed. But what I want to say is I think the ecosystem now has become very predatory, much, much more predatory than it used to be before. And back then, someone could take a bit of advantage of you, but it was easier for you to fight back, to be like, hey, maybe, I'm not paying so much on rent or on my mortgage, and my wage is pretty good, actually. So I can afford Donkey Kong Country if I want to. If I don't want to, it's still fine. But now what are you going to do? The consumers are in such a weakened state and you're being attacked from all sides. It's being made so difficult for you to, it feels like every transaction that is being made is against the consumer, and you have
Yeah.
to be in a constant state of alertness to protect your wallet, to protect your financial well-being. I know, fortunately, that in Europe, debt is not as a huge thing as it is in the United States. But to me, it is crazy how normalized it is
Yeah.
to go
Right.
into debt, you know, to
disturbs
be
me.
a financial victim of companies and stuff like that.
And it hurts a little bit more when Nintendo says you have to pay $10 for your instruction manual.
Yeah.
And it hurts a little bit more when Nintendo says that, no, this game's really good, it's worth paying $80 for. It's like, you know, I get that completely. You know, I do wish that Nintendo had a more pro-consumer outlook, even if it's not, you know, the thing to expect anymore from the current state of financial affairs in our Western world.
Something I wanted to mention, I don't know if you know about this, but have you heard about the Clippy movement?
No.
Where people change their profiles to Clippy because of YouTube?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Because why?
It has to do with this.
Okay,
I
so-
thought it had to do with this YouTube ID verification thing.
Yeah, it's not only that. I think what I saw was mentioned. I'm also gonna loot drop that. Is that there was, I think, like a lawsuit or some case in court with Facebook, that there were like some teenage girls that deleted, you know, pictures of themselves, and then the Facebook algorithm immediately knew that they probably have a low self-esteem. That's why they're deleting pictures or not making them public anymore. So let's bombard them with cosmetic ads to feed this psychological dependency. And I think it was considered legal now. And then a YouTuber, I don't remember his name, but he made a video about that, and he was like, remember in the 90s when Microsoft computers or just Microsoft Office or whatever, they were sued because they just had Internet Explorer pre-installed. That's all. They didn't sell you anything. They didn't track anything. They didn't bombard you with ads that they psychologically kind of deduce from your actions that everything is tracked nowadays. It's just, hey, here's Internet Explorer also. And they were sued for that. And it was kind of to compare the state of how much money, power, and how aggressive companies have gotten. That Clippy, he didn't have any goals. I think that there's a very good quote from the video that Clippy didn't want to sell you something. He didn't have any ulterior motives. He just wanted to help you. And there is nothing like that nowadays. Like everything, like that is pre-installed or that comes with something, it's there to take advantage of you in some way, mainly monetarily, otherwise your data or whatever. And this is why it's like, bring back Clippy. You know, he was kind of a meme because of how annoying he was. But at least he didn't want to take advantage. He just wanted to help.
Right. He didn't have some sort of he wasn't suggesting a new keyboard that you can get. Or I have that problem with them. I won an Echo Dot many years ago. And so I had it, and I use it almost entirely as a Bluetooth speaker. But when it says, oh, you have a message, and it's like, well, what do you mean? And then it's just like an advertisement, you know, where it'll answer a question you have, and then it'll be like, would you like me to buy this thing or whatever? And it's like, oh my God, like that, you know, that's so invasive, so dystopian, just right there. And that is like how every interaction that you have on the internet that has any sort of advertisements, you know, it's hostile, you know. I agree with that. That's really rough.
And here, as you mentioned it, Daisy, that Nintendo is, I think you mentioned, Lucas, that they are making profit. They're the only video game company that are making profits. I think Switch was their best-selling
They
console.
profit on the hardware, meaning when they make let's say they make a Switch 2 for $400, they sell it for $450. They profit on the hardware.
And that's different from Sony,
Yeah.
who are probably producing PS5s for like $700 or something like that, and then they're just selling them at a significant loss.
Yeah.
But you know, they're making up for it in game sales and subscriptions and stuff like that.
Right.
And Nintendo could also, at least now, I'm not even saying that they should do it, but at least these little things like the Switch tutorial, the welcome to Switch 2,
The welcome
like
tour.
at least make that free. You know, like how difficult is that to make as a choice? You can see in very small, minute choices where it's really, I think it would be really easy for Nintendo to be like, hey, let's give it away for free. We're not going to make a financial loss. There's no reason. But it feels like now more than ever that the consumers are down in the dust and Nintendo keeps kicking them. Like more
Right,
so
but-
than
but
they
it's more like they're behaving like everybody else then,
yeah,
right?
okay, all right.
You
So
know?
we're gonna go
And
back
that's
a little
the
bit.
saddest part of it.
We're gonna go back a little bit because we were talking about bricking consoles, and
Mm-hmm.
this is another opportunity to shout out Moon Channel because they already did a video on this. And after that video, I was like, I have to confirm this for myself. So I went and I kind of looked it up, right? Because me and my personal friends, we were actually having like an active conversation about it. Sony can brick the PS5, they can brick the PS4, they can brick the PS3. Nintendo could brick your GameCube if they had the capability. Legally, they've always had the capability to do this. Xbox can brick your Xbox, and they have the capability to do this. All of them do, and they have for a long
have
time.
they done it?
Yes.
Are there cases?
Yes, and there's cases with it with Nintendo too, with the Switch and well, I don't know about the Wii U, but they happen. The only thing
With
Nintendo
the
did
Switch,
this
is
time,
it?
yes, the only thing Nintendo did this time is that they made it clear, because the other, when you're reading through those terms and conditions, which nobody does, I've never done it. They word it in weird legalese ways so that they can if they need to, but that you're not necessarily going to realize it. YouTube were just clear about it. They were just like, look, don't mod our console.
But
Don't do it.
okay, I know a lot about the Switch modding community, and I don't know that much about Sony, about the PS5. I don't even know. I never owned one, so I don't know how it works with that. But I've modded, I've hacked a Switch. I know people that have both hacked the Switch 1 and tried with the Switch 2. And with
And
the
you
Switch 1,
didn't get bricked, right?
No.
Right.
And
Because
actually, even if you do something, even if Nintendo finds out that you did something illegal, they don't brick your console.
Right.
They just disable your Nintendo account, your Nintendo Online account.
And
they
that's
don't
exactly
brick your console.
that's
Now
exactly
there's
what they
cases
do with the
of them
Switch too.
bricking your console, literally destroying it because they don't like what you're doing with it, with a piece of hardware that you own, that you are
Does that
supposed to.
happen on the Switch too?
It's the software. It's
Yeah.
the software. It's the software that runs on the Switch too. And even then, okay, that's not the point. The point is that they've always been able to do it, and they have done it. But now Nintendo's just being clear about it. They're just saying, don't mod our console, right? And here's the thing, there are plenty of people who have and are going to mod the Switch 2 console, right? They're going to do it, and they're gonna be fine. Some people are not gonna be fine if Nintendo detects it. What Nintendo are trying to do is they're trying to prevent people developing emulators because of the whole
but-
Yuzu thing. If you're at all familiar
Okay,
with
but
that.
students, I've brought a counter argument.
Okay.
You said that they used to do it in the past. They did it with the Switch 1, if I understand from the context, to the same extent even as with the Switch 2. And my counter argument is that, of course, it is possible to brick a device. This happens with any device, but that a company purposefully bricks your console when they notice that you've tinkered with it. They didn't do it with the Switch 1, but they are doing it. Like, there's no cases of even this year, even a few months ago, I'm very up to date to the Switch modding community. They always said, hey, if Nintendo finds out, they're just gonna ban your Nintendo Online account, but they're not gonna break your console. You never had to worry about that. You have to worry about it if you fuck up something with the binaries and whatever, but then it's your own fault. If you destroy the literal inner workings of it. But with the Switch 2, there are cases of Nintendo just finding out, they notice immediately that someone tinkered with it, bricked. Even though they did something which shouldn't have bricked the consoles. Because for the moment, it's not amateurs that are doing it. It's not been successfully hacked. So it's kind of pros that are tinkering with the Switch 2. And it's very obvious that Nintendo is cracking down on it much, much more. There's lots of evidence about it. I can link it in the loot drop that I don't think it's comparable. I don't think it's to me, honestly, it's a bit, or it sounds like a simplification to be like, now Nintendo is just nicer and they are just letting you know, but it's the same risk as it has always been before. Nothing has changed. I don't think that's true. I have to disagree.
They're just clearer. They're more black and white about it. They're like, we are going to do this. But the thing is, people are going to mod their Switch 2s as they already have, and they're not going to get bricked. Now, if you connect it to a third-party thing that connects to the Switch 2 has a more sophisticated what's the thing called? There are internal data codes that you have to use to start playing a game, right? It's just a way for the Switch to check to make sure that it's valid software. The Switch 2 is more sophisticated in detecting when that is or is not correct, right? And if you've got third-party stuff going into it that's trying to access those things, those data encryptions, the Switch 2 is better about detecting it, and then they will affect your Nintendo account, right?
Again, the Switch 1 has, if it's detected, it's not being bricked. You're just banned from online, but you're not being bricked if it's detected. That's a substantial.
I want to take this too. I want to ask about the morality of the situation, because I think it's interesting and it's a unique gray area. So, Damien, you were talking about how you specifically are, you're very up to date with like the Switch modding community, and that this is a big sticking point for you. And Tudens, you were talking about how they're trying to prevent emulation from occurring on like a modern product that's like coming out right now. And so, there's this, there's a perspective that I can understand where you're saying like, I bought it, I went to a store, I paid a certain amount of money, they gave me a thing, I can do whatever I want with this thing, and you can never stop me from doing it. But the reason that Nintendo is stopping is to try and prevent the development of the reverse engineering that occurs within the Switch 2, so that people can effectively pirate and steal their games, which are their intellectual property or whatever, things like that. Yeah. So, and of course, it always stays on the down low, and you always kind of got to be in the know about that. But if you didn't do any regulations, you didn't take anything down, then that would be big. Okay, whatever. So anyway, this is all the same with like movie piracy, or it's like we've gone through this conversation a lot before. So what I want to know from your perspective, Damien, is what do you think is like correct? Do you think it is correct for Nintendo to not ever brick a console, not ever ban an account, that you can do whatever you want with it, and that's, it's like, and that's not like a huge devil's advocate. I'm just kind of curious where you fall on that exactly, because I know that you engage with that part of the world, and I think that there is a lot to be said about like fairness and equality and the ability for everybody to experience art.
Yeah, obviously I'm trying to see it as objectively as possible. I can see why, it can be something bad to pirate games, but in the end, who does it hurt the most if you pirate something? Is it the developers that were coding day in, day out? I think it's more kind of the shareholders and the CEOs, as far as I know. I'm not aware of any developer being paid less if, the people that actually make or design the game, I'm not aware of them being paid less or something if the game just pays less. It's just Nintendo as a company or the CEO. But that's the first thing. But I do understand it for the company. Like I'm not making it sound as harmless as it is. But I do understand, and it's logical that a company will try to defend itself, right? Nintendo has done this for many generations. I mean, this is why the Nintendo 64 stuck with cartridges, and why the GameCube had those little discs, which were ultimately their downfall, because they were so Yeah.
Well, and then I had a Sega Dreamcast that I could burn a copy of the video game with no problem. Yeah. And that's still how I sometimes play Sega Dreamcast games that I can't get a hold of. Is I find a ROM and I just burn it on a CD with a regular computer. you know.
Yeah.
So but again, here's the other thing though, is that there is the extreme that if there was no protection and there was, because you're right, I mean, like, first of all, fuck big corporations, you know, I'm all about that, I'm with you there, but at the end of the day, they are funding and developing these video games with really big budgets to create things that are like unique and that are like special and can't be done under other circumstances. And those circumstances would change if they let everybody tinker whatever and people had cracked it right away and there it is and here it's up and everybody knows how to get a flash card for your Switch 2. And then if you don't do anything about taking down those websites, then it's like it becomes really popular, really obvious. And then as soon as enough people are cutting into that, and again, fuck big corporations, but you will no longer be able to justify the large budgets to make the quality product that they're making. And so there are these extremes here that are really hard to moderate.
Yeah.
First of all, Sony. Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't like change. I mean, I'm not sitting here like advocating for them to be able to shut down your console. I'm just saying like this isn't new. This is how it's been. And sure,
that's a lot of this
the Switch 2, your point, Damien, is that the Switch 2, they're supposedly doing it more with the Switch 2. The Switch 2 is more sophisticated in its ability to detect it, right?
Again,
but the policy hasn't changed.
That it has been detected, and it doesn't have the same consequences. That's what I've been saying. It's not about being better at detecting. Even if the Switch 1 detects you pirating something, doing something illegal, Nintendo won't brick your Switch 1. They will just ban your online account. So it's not about detection.
Right. I have a hard time with solutions sometimes because I tend to zoom out a lot and I'm like looking at the big picture. And I want to know, Damien, do you feel like if you could change a policy about this at Nintendo, what would you change it to? And what do you think the ultimate result would be?
I think to kind of answer it, because I started from way far back, I think it's logical what Nintendo is doing. If I worked at Nintendo, honestly, maybe I would even think about bricking or whatever. But I think something that is still like an ethical solution, it's fine, would be to ban people from Nintendo Switch Online. But like destroying your system that you own, your piece of hardware that you own. Like imagine if like the government or whoever could brick your laptop if they notice that you did something illegal.
Right. I agree, so how many long-term consequences would be of not bricking anyone's consoles, of not like forcing like an activity to stop, not forcing somebody to stop trying to like root the software? Do you think that results in a piracy problem that becomes less surmountable by the company overall?
I mean, I think like the Switch 1 has like with a policy that they had where they didn't brick the Switch 1, it worked just fine for them. And I mean, Sony with the PS1 and with the PS2, it's, I think from what I know and remember, like I think most people that I know that ever owned a PS2, I think they pirated games and burned games, and they still did fine. So I'm not saying that, you know, unregulated piracy is still a thing. Like I think honestly, a lot of gamers are like collectors, are consumers. So like to me, emulating games never felt as satisfying as owning the cartridges and putting them into the consoles. I think a lot of gamers and a lot of gamers that maybe, you know, don't care about those things that much, I think they would play other games, like PC games, like, I don't know, Fortnite or whatever the youngins are playing these days.
It's still probably Fortnite.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, what's interesting is that when I was younger and didn't work and didn't have like access to money, you know, like I relied a lot on emulation. That was something that I really, really enjoyed. Is I did have emulators for, you know, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, all that. And I had like the whole library of all their games at my fingertips. And this didn't stop me from engaging with the retro marketplace. But the companies at the time who were not making these games available weren't they weren't hurt because as a consumer, I had no spending power, right? And so for me, as like a consumer and an art appreciator, I get to have all these memories and all this engagement with these video games that I otherwise wouldn't have been able to experience at all. And I always felt that way with like music. When music piracy was a big thing before streaming made it more accessible, there was this idea that it was like, you know, I'm not stealing because I wouldn't have gone and spent the money on this album otherwise. You know, it's like I'm just listening to music that I otherwise wouldn't have gotten the opportunity to listen to. And so there were these gray areas were a little bit easier for me to navigate. But as an adult with spending power, with the wallet and all that, you know, I do wonder how how piracy has to get factored into these things. And so what's interesting is that the government has given them the opportunity and the option of disabling somebody's hardware, which Two Deads is saying isn't new, but Damien, you're saying is something that's being newly employed. And so there is there's a dystopian feeling about like, okay, we're just getting a license to use your hardware. We're just getting a license to play your video game. It's like, I don't possess and own anything. And that's sort of like how everything's being constructed right now.
That I can agree with. I mean, again, it's not new, but it is the way that's how it's structured. Like you buy licenses to buy games. It's just the way it is.
And you're right, and
it's
I would
really,
rather
like that's not great. That's not good.
I agree, and to sympathize with Damien, I think that I would rather the pressure be on the other foot. I would rather the laws say that you can do whatever you want with your crap, and if we crack it and people are leaking their stuff and pirating it, it's like I would prefer if they had less power in that department and that they had to respond on the other side more. Or I agree that like the burden should be more on them. It's sort of like when people talk about climate change issues and somebody will say, oh, you should get like a hybrid, or you should use paper straws, and it's like, or the cruise industry could stop. You know what I mean? It's like there's this shift of blame, and I do think that too much falls on the consumer in our daily life in general. And so I can empathize with that to a degree, but also I have to say that any individual who is like tinkering with their Switch 2 right now, and they're making the decision to do that, and they want to be on that cutting edge, I don't know. I don't have a lot of sympathy for that guy, not because I think he's bad or don't like him, but like, yeah, dude, this is the role that you've decided to take. You'll have to go buy another one. You know, like my heart's not really breaking for the people who are trying to crack the Switch 2 right now either. Like that, it would be hard for me to consider that as a major point of contention as to the ethics of, buying or purchasing Nintendo products today.
Yeah, and it's I mean, I'm not even like quite there, right? Like I do think like if you have something, you should be able to do what you want with it, but that is right. Why we have to agree to end license user agreements and all. We have to do all that stuff. Right?
Yeah. It's a bigger issue.
People, I do think, the whole emulation war, especially the situation with the Yuzu emulator, and before that, the Citrus emulator, which was a 3DS one. I do think, like, if those people weren't dumb, and I'm sorry, but that's what it was. They were being stupid. Then we probably wouldn't be here just yet. And if anybody doesn't know, you can look up videos on it. Moon Channel, who I've talked about, has explained it well. But basically, Yuzu was a Switch emulator. They had a Patreon, and you could pay for, you could access the Switch emulator for free, right? But you could pay their Patreon, and then you could get new games like Tears of the Kingdom leaked and was released on the Yuzu emulator before it released in the real world. And people actually, or not the real world, but actually properly released. And people paid this Patreon to get access to that before the game actually came out. I mean, that's pretty clear cut. That's like these people stole this. Then they charged people for it. I mean, then they sold it. And like Nintendo was like, and so they cracked super heavy down, and now this is where we are. And before that, it was the Citrus emulator, which was the 3DS, which roughly the same thing happened. And even something like Dolphin, which is a long-running emulator.
Ubiquitous now.
Right.
Everybody knows Dolphin.
Right. Long-running emulator. They were trying to do something stupid a number of years ago and getting on Steam, and Nintendo was like, nah. But Dolphin is still around. Dolphin is still around, right? Nintendo hasn't axed Dolphin, though that's because Dolphin backed off right away, whereas Yuzu decided to fight it, which was also dumb. But like it's when you're doing this sort of stuff, you have to you can't be stupid. You have to understand that what you're like. This is why like people have modded their Switches, right? You can mod your Switch, you can mod your GameCube, you can mod your Wii, but you better not tell anyone else how to, or you better not like publicly post about how to do it, or you better not like advertise it in some way, because that's the thing that Nintendo is gonna strike down. Now the Switch 2,
right?
Damien, I'll give you credit. I am gonna research this. Because the previous things that I've read is that it's not really any different and it's not really that big of a deal. It's just more prevalent. You some resources. But it's just more prevalent because of the headlines, right? And the Switch 2 is more sophisticated in figuring that stuff out. That's just true, right? So maybe it's more
true. I didn't.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It is just true. So it's more prevalent now.
It's irrelevant.
Right. It's more prevalent. Yeah. It's more prevalent. But then you just got to be. You got to be careful. You got to be careful. I mean.
Yeah. Again, the thing is, again, like my point was not that the Switch 1 was as good at detecting as the Switch 2. It's that the consequences, the way you're punished by Nintendo, is much different. That back then, your Nintendo account couldn't work on that specific Switch anymore. Okay, it's not that bad as a punishment. And the other one, which is the current normal one, is the piece of hardware you spent hundreds of dollars for. It's worthless. You can't even sell it. It's not like you can't use it anymore. You can't, like, it's all worth is taking out of it. It's like, I'm not saying the police is better at detecting crimes. That's not the issue. The issue is that if the police would kill someone for watching porn, even though they're under 18 or something, that's what I'm saying. And the whole thing that comes with it, I can give you a very small example, is that every time you're tinkering with something, of course, you're running a certain risk. I'm not contesting that, It's always your own responsibility if something happens with it. But if a company tries to punish you disproportionately for no reason whatsoever, I can give you an example. I have a very shitty old notebook that I paid like $270 for. Probably less than that in today's money. And it had Windows, which is very bloated as an operating system, and it didn't work at all. And then I randomly saw, in my YouTube recommendations, a video about, with old ThinkPads from 10, 15 years ago, how you can make them fully functioning if you just turn them into Linux, which seemed like magic. And I did it. And imagine, you tinker with it, it came, there's the Windows symbol etched into the plastic of my laptop. Imagine if Microsoft bricked your laptop because you wanted to have it functioning and change the operating system. I think this is how I would compare it. And I think this just opens a can of worms that it can go very dystopian. As with prices, there are CEOs of video game companies that are thinking about charging gamers per hour for video games. It's like, what's the limit now? It's basically what video game companies can get away with. And who has the most influence on laws and how they're implemented? Is it the consumers or is it the shareholders and the companies? I'll let you decide.
Yeah. Publicly traded companies are, just a huge problem by themselves. I could talk about that forever, but it would derail us way too much. But what I do want to say is that, what you're getting at specifically here with the Switch 2 and the whole bricking thing, I think that there is, I would say that when you put Linux on your laptop, it had been done. You knew how to do it. There was a guide. You knew it was safe. Okay, that was all there, and nobody came out afterwards. Nobody came out before and said if you do this, we might take this away from you, whatever. There was not a risk there. You were not taking a risk in doing that. And maybe you were if you weren't super knowledgeable about it, but I think you are. So I don't think you were really taking a risk about like installing Ubuntu or whatever you did. Now, when it comes to the Switch 2 right now, I think inevitably, I don't know how long, there will be a Switch 2 emulator on PC. There will be people who know how to flash and root a Switch 2, and you will be able to get online and you'll go to wherever CD place you go to and you'll figure out how to do it and you'll get the instructions. And as long as you follow those instructions correctly, you will be able to do it and there won't be a problem. And I think the only people who this is affecting are the individuals who are pioneering the space. And the individuals who are pioneering the space, who I'm not willing to condemn as bad or whatever, I am willing to say that like they must have the disposable income. They must be like able and willing to put up with these roadblocks. Sure. And I think that these roadblocks are completely acceptable. And a really good example I can give from my personal life. Okay, I watch and love professional wrestling. I watch a lot of it. And sometimes that means I have to have cable. Sometimes it means I have to have a certain subscription service, whatever. But if I didn't, and I wanted to watch something live, I would know how to do it. And it's something that people don't talk about a lot, but I would know how to do it. You'd get in trouble if you're on Reddit and you tell me how to do it, but I know how. And I would go and do it, and I would watch a stream that is being streamed illegally by someone somewhere. And a couple times while I'm watching it, somebody would come in and shut the stream down, and the stream would get taken down, and I'd have to go find a new mirror, a new server, or something like that. And so that is, to me, an acceptable exchange. That is an acceptable roadblock. Somebody's got to do it. You can't just let it run wild. You can't just let this be a thing that's just like normal. But there is now a space for somebody like me who didn't have access to it at the time to still be able to like get their fix and watch the product that I care about and want to engage with. And now I think that when we're talking about what we're doing here in the Switch, I think that this is an appropriate roadblock. I don't think that anything is going to get bricked because of somebody innocent like you and somebody who's maybe in that space where they don't have as much money, but they want to engage with the art. I don't think those people are going to be hurt. I think those people just have to wait. And so I really again, what I do see in your argument though, is I see the extension, how far does it go? How much worse can it get? And that unfortunately is the field of science fiction. Unfortunately, that's the field of a lot worse. It could get way worse. And the way things are going in America right now specifically will get worse, for sure, considering the individuals who have a lot of control and a vested interest in these sorts of things, things will get worse. It will be worse. But on this particular moment, I'm more upset about Nintendo taking down ROM hacks. Right. I'm more upset about Nintendo interfering with Melee tournaments. Those are places where I'm what are you doing? You have no business here. You're hurting yourselves.
Yeah, I think our other conversation at this point, I don't know if it's going anywhere, but I'm gonna bounce off that because that's the stuff that Nintendo does that I just don't get. And and as I have a strict I have a very clear line in the sand for my my empathy towards those things. If those are fun projects that people are putting together just because they love it, right? Yeah. And Nintendo's going in and shutting them down, that's dumb. Melee tournaments, that's extra dumb because Melee, if as someone who watches a lot of esports, if Nintendo wasn't so unaccepting of Melee tournaments, Melee would be a massive esport, and it's a massive esport even though Nintendo isn't accepting of it.
In spite of it, they could be making so much money.
They could be making that's the thing that really blows me away. So much money, and even something and it's really inconsistent too, because you look at something like Pokemon Showdown, which is if you're at all familiar, it is integral to the competitive Pokemon space. It's a battle simulator that you can play on your phone, on your computer, wherever, right? And it has been around for a long time. I mean, it's been around for 15 years, something like that. And it is used every day by hundreds of thousands of people. It's incredibly important to the actual real competitive Pokemon space because it's so customizable. And you can test teams, and Nintendo have just let it do its thing. They've just let it do its thing. I'm a little worried now because there's a new game. There's a new game coming out, Pokemon Champions, that is, essentially what Showdown does. Although it's probably not going to be anywhere near as robust. So I am wondering, like, are they going to finally shut down Showdown? But Showdown's still there, and there's plenty of other, like, you go to GDQ or you watch GDQ, Games Done Quick, and they have like Nintendo randomizers on there, and randomizers are dramatic mods of video games, and they'll have games where people have combined A Link to the Past and Super Metroid, and then randomized the items in between them. Right? That's crazy. That's a massive modification of two games. And yet, that happens. That happens at GDQ almost every year. But then on the other hand, we have a situation from a few years ago where there was Point Crow. He's a YouTuber. He's just like this. I don't know. I kind of find him to be like a generic Nintendo YouTuber who just plays a bunch of games. But he modded his his Switch and Breath of the Wild. To have multiplayer, and maybe it's different because it's multiplayer, and there's some privacy and security concerns with modifying games to be able to access the internet when they're not supposed to. But so maybe that's why it's different. But they like nuked his channel. They like nearly destroyed his channel over those videos of him playing multiplayer Breath of the Wild. So it's not even just that they go after these fan projects. It's that they're also really inconsistent about when they go after things and why. And nobody actually knows why, because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to go after these things.
Well, and it's self-harm.
It's self-harm.
Shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the one huge thing to wrap this up is to talk also about video game preservation in general.
Yeah.
How do you play Castlevania, The Adventure Rebirth normally?
Right.
Legally.
Yeah.
How is it possible? Like a lot of WiiWare games or whatever. Nintendo does nothing to do that. And the gamers themselves are doing everything in their power to preserve video games. Actually, my partner is an audiovisual archivist. She studied audiovisual heritage and archiving of all of these media. And she told me during her master's that there was like someone who was teaching there, that he talked about the importance of this video game preservation that a lot of companies aren't, and a lot of people are doing illegally. I think a last thing to bring this home is let's just go back to the SNES. If I buy an SNES 20 years later, as I did, used, I buy a game. If the cartridge itself is not destroyed, if it's still functioning, I just pop it in, I can play. I feel that in the future, retro game collecting, when the Switch will be obsolete for 20 years, I don't think it's going to be that easy. With what's happening now, with these license keys, and yes, I know that other companies have done it before Nintendo, and to kind of address this point, it has been done before.
Yeah.
Just because something has been done before, it doesn't mean that it's not bad or that it's not even worse than the other times, you know? Like, if a genocide is happening now, it doesn't mean it's not as bad because genocides have happened in the past.
That's a jump. I'm gonna be really clear. Damian. Damian. When I was kind of prodding you earlier, it wasn't because I disagree with you. It's because it's not just Nintendo. It's a bigger problem that's everyone. But we're gonna move on. It's not just Nintendo. It's all of them. But I'm gonna say I 100% agree with you with this topic, because what does game preservation look like in the future? Because right now, you're right. Donkey Kong Bonanza, I've loved that game. 20 years from now, when my Switch 2 doesn't work, unless they're going to continue to do backwards compatibility somehow, I'm going to pop that, even if the cartridge, let's say the cartridge doesn't even work anymore, which is possible, pop that into the Switch 24 and it doesn't work because of a code, right? You know,
Yeah.
Right.
that is a big problem, and I think that's part of what's going on with the whole. Is it stop killing games, or is there something? Is that different? I think that's different.
It's
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's all
adjacent.
related. Yeah,
It's
related.
adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And
think
I
about
agree
it
with that
already.
too.
Go ahead, Daisy.
Oh, I was just gonna say. I mean, you're right, and that is a space where I want to say that it's like, you know, the pirates and the people who are actually going to accomplish this. I mean, go for it. You know, luckily I'm not in a position where I have to speak for a shareholder, or have to speak for a company. Go for it, please. You know, I'm just saying that like it's something that's self-selected. You know, if you're going to be somebody who cares about this, and you're going to be somebody who's going to take that undertaking, you're going to have certain risks and certain challenges, and I hope you have the resources to deal with them. But, you know, it's like the lawyers are like fighting in the middle, and they're doing the lawyer stuff, and you deploy lawyers to do law, you know, and to me, that's like, it's sort of just this messy system that's happening in between all involved parties. But at the end of the day, I think the developers want people to play their games. I think the developers want the art that they created to be available, you know, and I think that any digital archive or store of any like digital media is perfectly acceptable, preferable, important, significant, and meaningful, and it will be done extra legally. It will be done legally.
I think
you
so.
know, and it's like
it's going to be done.
That's just how it goes.
It's going to be done. I prefer the term extra legally, just because I think it better describes what's
super
happening.
Legally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's going to be done that way
super.
until there are laws that dictate how it has to be done, and that's not going to happen
And
anytime
that is
soon.
what Stop Killing Games is about.
Yeah.
And they're approaching the European government about that right now, about like a mandatory preservation element.
And I think
to
they're
digital
focused
products.
more. Yeah, I think their primary focus seems to be more like online service games, which is another big
Right.
issue, because there's just games like, I think about, there was an MMORPG that released and died very quickly many years ago at this point, called WildStar. And you
Right.
I don't think there's probably a private server out there somehow. That game just doesn't exist. That you cannot, you paid for that game, you can't play that game. It's gone.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And
you look at something recently like Concord.
Yeah.
Same deal.
Gone. It's just gone. But even like when games update, you know, I think about like World of Warcraft, right? World of Warcraft took forever to finally release their classic WoW, but classic WoW nowadays is not the same game as even released 5 years ago, much less back in 2004.
Right.
You cannot play World of Warcraft the way that it originally released, because even if you go onto private servers, which do exist, those aren't truly what it was either, because they're like doing their best to like estimate what it used to be like, right? And it's the same thing for RuneScape and Star Wars The Old Republic and any of these other games that require online connection at all times. You can't play them the way that they were originally released. But it doesn't even have to be multiplayer games, because single-player games get updated too, and unless you know how, which there are ways to do it, but generally with a single-player game, they'll update it over time. You can't play it how it was originally released unless you know how, which some people do, and like speedrunners do that all the time. That's true, but it doesn't work with everything. It doesn't work with, you know, some consoles are more welcoming of that than others, and yeah, you can't play those games. They just don't exist.
Yeah, and you can't see the Mona Lisa as it looked when it was originally painted, and when we can't know all the completely lost and extinct animals on the planet. And you know, it's like, it is a very human folly to try and archive and to try and capture, Lisa, but it's still worth doing.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like that's different, because the Mona Lisa was painted, you know, well, I don't know, a long time ago. I don't know when the Mona Lisa was painted. I don't pay attention to that.
Yeah, that's okay.
Hundreds or thousands.
Either.
Yeah,
right.
hundreds or thousands
of years. It was updated by time.
Yeah, it's probably hundreds of years ago, right? But
yeah.
The Mona Lisa wasn't a product. Well, I mean, at the time, I'm sure it was. Like, someone probably commissioned whoever did the Mona Lisa. I don't know. Whoever did the Mona Lisa. But, you know,
Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da Vinci. Yes, sorry, I do not care
It's
about.
okay.
like,
Video game.
I know video game. I know other.
I just lived in Florence.
Historical art I'm not that interested in. But WildStar was a product that was marketed and people paid for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dune is an excellent book that I can go to the store and buy. I can go to the store and buy Dune. You know, you got Star Wars. You can go to the store and buy the original Star Wars movie. You
can't buy those. You can't buy like the original Bible.
Probably can't.
That's an example of something where it's like that came with DLC, that came with updates,
true.
Things got patched out.
I mean, I don't know.
It's like
I actually don't know.
What we're dealing with is we're dealing with the acceleration. That's my specialty. But we're dealing with the acceleration of information, and so it's funny. You're totally right. And the fact that is gone, that's actually kind of scary, right? The fact that like it slipped through your fingers, and did anybody think to preserve anything? Can you find old footage of it online?
Yeah.
Can you find, the experience of what it was like to be in a guild? Like, and it's crazy that was just like 10 years ago or something. It wasn't even that long ago, but it's already like blink of an eye. It's just happened. It's over. It's gone. And that will continue to happen to us.
Yeah. Go ahead, Damien.
Go ahead.
I want to make a question and a prediction. So I think that the Switch 2 or maybe the Switch 3, not only will the games have an expiration date, because why not? When you can't sell it anymore, you can't earn any money of it or from the servers or whatever. So why allow people to play it? It's one huge factor why I'm not buying the Switch 2, because I have lots of older games to play. If I didn't, I might have been forced. So if I was one of the evil Wario people eating garlic in the Nintendo headquarters, like twirling my mustache, I would be thinking to put expiry dates on games, on licenses, because obviously licenses expire, and that's what you buy with, I don't know, I think with the new Yakuza game, or with the Yakuza remaster that came out with the Switch, as far as I know. It's only possible to buy it per license. If you don't have a Wi-Fi or whatever, for whatever reason, you can't download it and all of that. And I don't know, will it still be playable like 10 years later? Here's the other question. What about gaming consoles?
Well,
they could introduce that. Why shouldn't Nintendo brick the Switch when it's obsolete and they can't earn any money off it anymore?
No, well, we're seeing that right now with like Teslas and stuff. They can just brick your car when you're cruising around and just.
But they don't. The thing is,
that's just what's happened.
They don't even need to do that. That's the thing. They don't need to do that, and the reason is because eventually, like GameCubes. Now we're getting to GameCubes are pretty well put together, but getting to the point where GameCubes are just generally stopping working. Like even Game Boy Advance cartridges. Game Boy Advance cartridges, they literally have a, there's an internal clock where it's an internal battery, and once that battery dies, it's gone. You can't play that game anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It's just gone. They don't need to do that because consoles will eventually stop working, and then if you don't have if the hardware doesn't exist to play the game, you can't play the game. I mean,
and there's an arms race happening.
Yeah.
And that's something that like you always have to remember is when you were talking about, and we're talking about the ethics of of the bricking the consoles and all that, but the hackers will win.
Yeah.
They will do it. But if you're gonna put like expirations on your games, they're gonna work harder and faster.
Yeah,
and it's gonna become more available. It's the whole thing with streaming services. People quit pirating TV shows because Netflix had everything, and now you're paying for everything. And now a lot of people are going back to pirating TV shows.
Yeah.
It's the arms race. There will always be a black market that answers the white market.
Right.
And so it's not perfect and it's not good, but that's the answer to your question.
Yeah, I believe that most consumers are not evil. They don't want to steal. I think a lot of them will find something pleasant in owning something, in buying something. Like I know that I could emulate so many games, but I kept buying and collecting Nintendo things.
You can probably read whatever book you want, or you can go to the store and buy it and have it on your shelf.
Yeah.
So I think the best solution to piracy is just being consumer friendly. And
I
I
agree.
think
I totally agree.
when the consumer is attacked, I think it's the only answer. It's the only way that the consumers themselves can respond to it. So here's a solution. If you don't like piracy, then just make consumers happy without it.
Yeah.
Obviously, there will always be people that will pirate. I think I know people, for example, from Brazil, because of how Nintendo like is dealing also with how it's been, the taxes and all of that. It's really unaffordable. I think a Switch would
Yeah,
cost
it's bad in
like
Brazil.
almost 1,000 or something. So it's really like we're talking about a population that is comparable to that of the US, I think, and that basically, they just can't afford it. So I think there will always be people in need that will pirate if they can, but I think most people, when they don't need to pirate or when they feel like it's a good deal and they're not getting taken advantage of, I think they're willing to help and support the company. And this is how I feel. I was a Nintendo fanboy. I did feel an affiliation, and I like, it as a concept. But when the video game company turns against you and backstabs you for no reason with very meaningless, like you said, they don't need to do that. Yes, but they also didn't need to, to charge €10 for this or $10 for this Switch 2 intro guide thing. But they still did it because they can. They also didn't need to sell Mario Kart World for $90 or euros, but they did it because they can. And I think this is the problem, that we've gotten to a point where instead of the consumers trusting the companies and the companies trusting the consumers, there's been too much distrust that I believe has started from the companies themselves. And now the companies don't trust the consumers and the consumers don't trust the companies. And I think this relationship needs to be kind of healed. And if you think about it, where are most of the evil or conniving people? Is it, I guess, the population of consumers, everyone that plays video games? Or is it the shareholders who probably got through a lot of shady politics and connections and, House of Cards kind of scheming things to reach those positions? I'm not saying that every shareholder
ain't gonna argue with that.
Like a bad person. But I do think that I think there's studies that there's that there's a high representation of people with with the dark traits like Machiavellianism, sociopathy, and narcissism in higher CEO and shareholder positions. So I think this is actually the root of this, and the solution is that either bottom up, it is they force, there's like a consumer revolution that forces companies to be consumer friendly again, or the consumer companies just wake up, kind of like Sony with the PlayStation, and they're like, hey, I'm just gonna, everyone is bad towards consumers. I'm gonna be nice towards consumers, and that's how I'm gonna get everyone on my side. That's what Sony did. Sony didn't crack down so much on piracy, and it made them a giant. It saved them. I think it was also a huge factor, like piracy, why the PS2 is the best-selling console of all time, and it might stay as the best-selling console of all time for a very long time still. So I do think that you can be consumer-friendly. You can, to a certain extent, kind of turn an eye to certain kinds of piracy. Not saying to be like totally fine with it, and to still win and come out on the top with that.
Yeah, fair.
I ain't gonna argue with that.
I think I agree with that with just a little bit less fervor.
Yeah.
Sure. I think that you have good points. I'm pro-consumer. I would love for that to happen too. And I think it's really sad that your whole rant, there was no consideration for like a government policy change, because that's just so far
I don't believe
gone,
in it.
Such a far distant.
Is it even possible at this point? Here's the question.
Yeah, we're pretty in the deep of a lot of mess right now. But I do think you're right. I do think that ultimately the way to win back anyone for anything is to produce high quality, consumer friendly things. I think that the indie space is the space that's going to grow from it the most. I think we're going to see that constantly left and right. I think there will be better, higher budget indie games that are able to sell at higher prices and are able to get a lot more goodwill and fill in those spaces that maybe the big companies are missing out on. And I mean, there'll be a shift. You know, we have long lives ahead of us. There will be a shift. You will see more. And I will agree that this moment of anti-consumerism in the game space sucks. And also that Donkey Kong Bonanza is very good.
It is very good.
And that those two things
it
are
is
true.
Very good.
Yeah.
It is very good. With that, let's talk about what we've been playing lately. Briefly before we end the show. Daisy, what have you been playing?
Oh, well, I've been playing Donkey Kong Bonanza, of course. I've been playing Donkey Kong Bonanza. I've been playing Death Stranding 2. I've been playing Octopath Traveler 2, which I'm looking forward to talking about on another time. And I've also been playing a little bit of Baldur's Gate with my partner, which has been fun.
The first one or the third one? The first one? The second one?
The third one.
Okay.
Yep. And then Street Fighter 6, because EVO just happened recently, and I had a lot of fun watching it. Yeah, one of my favorite players won the whole thing, and it was just a lot of fun. And they finally put the last season of DLC on sale. So I scooped that up, and my daughter loves playing fighting games with me. So we've been just going back and forth, finding new mains from the DLC. And, it's been a lot of fun. It's always going to be a big part of my life and something that I love a lot. So
very cool.
What about yourself, Damien? What have you been playing?
It's topical because I've been playing Donkey Kong Country Returns, the remake on the Switch.
Oh, it's a great game. Love that game.
Yeah. And it's really so good. Like, I like thinking back, like comparing it to other games, even to Super Mario Wonder, I think Donkey Kong Country Returns has like something really special, something I can't put like my finger on it, but the level design, I think Mark Brown, also another loot drop, but Mark Brown has done like a video about Tropical Freeze, I think, where they introduce a concept and then they evolve that concept in the game design of Retro Studios. And I think that's something very beautiful to witness. Like, it's an amazing game as a platformer. I think it has a very good amount of difficulty. And obviously, if you're not so skilled, there's always like easier options. I think towards the end, it can get a bit unfair. And I played it with as a 2-player mode with my partner. And even though, she's less experienced with platformers, it was still like very, very fun to play with. And even though it's much more difficult and she's not so patient with difficult games, she also enjoyed it more than Mario Wonder, which is also an amazing game. So I think it's like a huge testament to how well this game aged. I don't know, like, is it 10 years old, maybe 15 years old at this point?
Yeah, something
like
but
that.
It holds up, and it's really like it's like a secret gem now. People are really rediscovering how great that game is, and I'm just happy to know that you're also collecting bananas somewhere.
Yeah, collect those bananas.
Yeah,
we're all three collecting bananas right now, some way. How about you, Two Dens? What are you doing?
I finished up Donkey Kong Bonanza, and I have been working on a very dense script with it. That game is
looking forward to it.
Absolutely incredible, Damien. You will be very happy to hear that it is far superior to Mario Odyssey. It is a dramatic improvement on Mario. It's made by the same team. I also am going to say something. I think it's better than Breath of the Wild. Not kind of the same kind of game, but I think it's better than Breath of the Wild. I think
it's more fun.
Yeah,
I can say that pretty confidently without having beaten it.
Yeah,
I think it hits a lot of the same notes somehow, and it's just more fun.
Nintendo definitely, I do talk about this in my video, Nintendo has a framework that I've noticed in a lot of their Switch games, not just like Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom and Bonanza, but in like other games too, like Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and the Pokemon games kind of follow. They have a new framework, which is kind of unique to them, that they really refined for Bonanza. It is very, very good. So if you ever get the chance to play that game, you should, because it's excellent. I've also been replaying Pokemon Legends Arceus, which is an amazing game.
Super fun.
Probably obviously we talked about this before. It's not my favorite Pokemon game of all time, but it's probably the best Pokemon game ever made. And something I'm realizing about it playing it again is that it has really, really, really good sound design. Like the way that the little jingles that they use to when you catch a Pokemon or you get an item, or when you activate when you mount the riding Pokemon, like the little things in their sound design, the little click that happens when you activate an agile move or a strong style move. Very, 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 they clearly thought a lot about that. So it's really, the sound design is really something. But yeah, that's what I've been playing. And otherwise I haven't had time because I've been busy.
Yep.
Which
moves, you got a whole life going on there.
Yeah. Which moves on to our loot drops. So Damien, why don't you get us started? You've been alluding to it this whole time.
There's a YouTuber, I think it's the only video of her that I've seen. Her channel is called The Background NPC, and she's done an analysis of the Switch 2 launch 2 months ago, and how she used to be a Nintendo fanboy and why she's not anymore. And I share a lot of the views. There's also from another channel that I don't remember, but I'm also going to loot drop, which is an excellent analysis, very in-depth about comparing the launches and how the morals of Nintendo have changed, which I think is very topical. And I think I've mentioned some other loot drops that I've forgotten throughout, but I will also link those in the description. How about you, Lucas?
Cool. All right, Daisy.
Sure. So I just I'm not so much in the YouTube essay category on this subject. I don't really have a lot that I want to point anyone to, or I don't feel like I have strong opinions that need to be justified. I'm pretty broad on that. So instead, I just want to direct our listeners or viewers to some very consumer-friendly product. And I just want everybody to consider checking out the video game UFO 50. UFO 50 is made by Mossmouth Games. They made Spelunky 1 and Spelunky 2. And UFO 50 is just an incredibly consumer-friendly package. It is 50 unique video games spanning the history of a fictional video game console and a fictional video game developer. And it is just so smartly developed, curated, and it has so many brilliant experiences on there, and everybody has a very different experience with this game. And I think it's like $20, and it just became available on the Switch. It's been on Steam for a little while, and if it's something that you're interested in, I definitely, when I'm talking about the indie space kind of coming in and starting to fill the gaps a little bit, I really feel like UFO 50 could be a watershed moment in making up for some of this lost time by providing this incredible history of fictional retro video games. So
is UFO 50
a little different for today, but check out UFO 50.
Is UFO 50 a very excellent indie game that uses not crazy detailed graphics that happens to be extremely brilliant?
That is exactly what I would say it is. Yeah,
weird.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
weird.
Very simple. It stays in the 8 to 16-bit. It's all running on fictional hardware, which, so it's not like you're playing something restricted by NES hardware, but it's all in the spirit of NES games. And it is so good. It is so well designed, so well thought out. Everybody will have different thoughts about which games stuck out to them and which ones they like and whatnot. And, it's just really beautiful piece of work that is very affordable, very responsibly made by a developer that I just, I would stand all day long.
Sounds excellent. My loot drop.
How about you?
Okay, so are either of you at all familiar with Nate Wants to Battle? Do you know who that is?
I'm not.
Nate Wants to Battle. He was kind of one of those old school YouTubers who started off with Pokemon parodies. Like I think he did songs. And last year, every year the Pokemon Company put together a soundtrack for their world championships. So they have the championships. Last year it was in Honolulu. This year it was in Anaheim, California. And they put together a soundtrack. And last year, Nate Wants to Battle was one of the people who got to compose a song and put it together for that. And this year, he performed on stage at the opening ceremonies. And it was amazing. And the video is 7 minutes long. It's on the official Pokemon channel's YouTube channel. And I think you should watch it because it is amazing. So anyone who wants to watch that was like, even if you don't know who Nate Wants to Battle are, it's just a really awesome opening ceremonies. So I suggest you watch it. I watched it a couple days ago.
Yeah, and that brings back so many memories. I haven't followed him for years.
Yeah.
I forgot he existed, but yeah, thank you so much for that. Yeah.
All right. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time. Oh, and join our Discord.
Right.
Bye. Also that.